how Grav weapons feel in Warhammer 40k 10th edition.
That was 150 times gravity. Not even that can slow me down now.
Greetings to the 22.4 thousand Grimdark enjoyers of my channel, and a friendly hello to the 53% who haven't subscribed. As I was perusing the Imperial Arsenal, it occurred to me how underwhelming Grav weapons are in 10th edition. So much so, I think a case can be made the design is poor. As the title suggests, this is the Grav weapon problem. And in this video, through a series of robust analyses, we'll go into why exactly this is the case. As you see,
I'm something of a scientist myself.
But first, it's probably worth defining what are Grav weapons. For those unfamiliar, Grav weaponry, also called graviton weapons or Grav weapons, are devastating graviton-based personal and vehicle weapons employed in varying capacities across the Imperial war machine. The graviton technology they utilize is a type of ancient tech, which turns the mass of the target against itself, which naturally lends Grav tech as an ideal weapon for large targets. An example which speaks to just that cites Grav weapons being especially effective in demolition or siege scenarios, with another example denoting Grav weapons are shockingly effective against heavy armored troops as well, pointing to Terminators in the example. And it's noteworthy that this ancient tech is rare, with Space Marine chapters and AdMech being the only factions which have access to it on the Imperial side. From this we know two things. Grav weapons are especially potent anti-armor weapons which increase in potency the larger their target is. And that they are rare. Grav weapons are a superior technology from the before times, and so it's reasonable to posit they would, at the very least, be equally useful to the mass-produced Melta and Plasma alternatives. And with that defined, we can move on to the problem. Here on screen are the various types of Grav weapons available to Space Marines, and they fall into the standard tiers. Pistol is pistol, Grav gun as standard, and Grav cannon as heavy relating to the various weapon tiers used by infantry, with the Grav Flux Bombard serving as the larger vehicle-grade type. There are several issues, and already the absurdity of what can be seen is setting my righteous fury ablaze. Let's start with the design decision of anti-vehicle. This is dumb.
What?
I can hear you ask, how can a positive ability be dumb? Well, here's why. For a reason we cannot fathom, the designers felt like Grav weapons should be the opposite of Dark Eldar poison weapons from 9th edition, which is certainly a choice. I don't know if the designers are aware, but giant monsters are also affected by the forces of gravity. And you can look no further than the Eldar Haywire weaponry for a weapon type that specializes in being exclusively effective against vehicles, which I'll also point out is rooted in an entirely different technology base than Grav weapons. In summary, making Grav weapons exclusively anti-vehicle limits its effectiveness against monster units and creates dissonance between the game mechanics and the narrative at play. It is therefore, vis-a-vis, ipso facto, dumb. And keeping the strength profile so low that Grav weapons have poor wound rolls for all other large targets is dumber still.
My goodness, what an idea.
Why didn't I think of that?
On to damage. 2 damage, while not the sexiest, is a damage standard that can work for Grav weapons. Plasma weaponry has demonstrated that with appropriate volume, strength, and AP, a 2 damage standard can serve as an adequate anti-armor option. But that possibility is completely undermined by the inadequate strength and -1 AP standard across all tiers of Grav weaponry. For the moment, let's put aside the anemic strength for any target which isn't a vehicle. Sure, high toughness is a common sight when it comes to vehicle units. But you know what else vehicles often have?
Good armor saves.
Crazy, I know. Who would have guessed vehicles that are tough would also have good armor? This inadequate AP for an anti-vehicle weapon is only exacerbated by the benefits of cover, which is everywhere. It results in Grav weapons firing into vehicles having the opposite problem of Melta weapons, where Grav weapons can wound vehicles well, but is no better at breaking through armor than a heavy bolter. And that's the ideal scenario, firing a Grav cannon into a vehicle unit. But what about targets other than vehicles? Well, against monsters, the Grav cannon is humbled by las cannons and multi-meltas. And against everything else, they are pretty much outclassed by plasma guns. So...
Congratulations!
You've made rare, Dark Age Grav technology less potent and less valuable than mass-produced alternatives.
Please clap.
And before moving on, we have the Shining Turd which sits upon Grav Mountain. A sentiment I despise I am able to claim. The Grav Flux Bombard is so poorly ruled it's baffling. This Dark Age weapon, which just oozes sci-fi flavor, isn't scaled properly at all. Every time I look at this profile, I can't help but wonder if the designers even bothered to give a single fuck. For starters, let's look at the damage. Oh, the damage. Why? Why does the Leviathan Dread's Grav Flux Bombard only deal 2 damage compared to the infantry-held Grav Cannon's 3 damage?
It's so dense.
You can't honestly look at these 2 weapons and tell me the Grav Flux Bombard deals less damage. As for how the other characteristics scale, more strength is fine and expected when moving to a vehicle-grade variant of a weapon type. Though the number of attacks here is odd. 2d3 attacks means minimum 2, max 6, which sure is less swingy than just d6 attacks. But half the time the Grav Flux Bombard will be making an amount of attacks equal to or less than that of the infantry-held Grav Cannon. And yes, Blast can give you more shots, but Blast does shit all when trying to shoot at vehicles, which in the majority of cases are units of 1. Really, the Grav Flux Bombard needs a quantity of shots more akin to the Demolisher Cannon. But even then, it falls short of the Demolisher Cannon's AP all of the time, its damage most of the time, and its strength when firing into anything other than a vehicle. It results in the Grav Flux Bombard being better suited for infantry than it is for vehicles. Which is embarrassing for the tip-top weapon type the designers have decided to position as anti-vehicle. An outcome which is only made further awkward when we consider it's an exclusive weapon for the Leviathan Siege Dreadnought.
You idiot!
The fix. So what should be done? How should Grav weapons be handled? Well, while I do have a galaxy brain idea where Grav weapons would be a low damage, high AP weapon type, which has anti-4+ for vehicles and monsters, and an ability which gains more volume of attacks relative to the target's toughness, it may be a bit much for some. Instead, here's a solution which is more conservative. It starts with giving Grav weapons a new ability called Grav, which gives that weapon the anti-vehicle and anti-monster abilities with a value equal to the target's save characteristic. So now monstrous creatures will be affected by the gravity fields as well, while also adding a dynamic quality to the anti-threshold, which will in most cases scale with the density of those targets. Using game mechanics to abstract the narrative. What a wild idea. And from here we're going to adjust the stat lines slightly. For the Grav pistol, I actually think the existing stat line is fine. A pistol is a fairly small weapon, and so the existing -1 AP is appropriate. For the Grav gun, we're just gonna bump the AP by 1. This results in a special weapon that is more reliable at dealing 2 damage to vehicles and monsters than the plasma gun, with the exception of its AP characteristic when the plasma is supercharged. And compared to the Meltagun, the Grav gun will likely wound vehicles and monsters easier and at a greater range, but is outclassed by the Meltagun's AP and damage potential, which is almost double. For the Grav cannon, I'd suggest strength being increased by 2 and the AP by 1. With that, here in the heavy weapon tier, Grav begins to pull ahead of Plasma when going into single model vehicle and monster units. And with this profile, it now creates a nice downward scale, where vehicle and monster efficacy increases at the cost of range. And for the Grav Flux Bombard, I'd suggest increasing the number of shots from 2d3 to d3 plus 3, taking the attack quantity range from 2 to 6 to now 4 to 6. I'd suggest for the strength and AP to be increased by 2, and for the damage to be increased by 1. All of which I feel make it more tasteful relative to the Grav cannon, and makes the Leviathan Siege Dreadnought's Grav Flux Bombard much more intimidating. Rightfully so. Well, those are the problems I find with Grav weapons and my suggested fix for them. I'll close out this video with a question. It's something that crossed my mind while thinking about how crap Grav weapons are in 10th edition. Is it possible that GW intentionally left Grav weapons in a nonsense state on purpose? I'll try not to get too conspiratorial here, but the reason to do so would be that in the future, Grav weapons can get fixed, and GW can say,
"Your savior is here!"
thereby signaling their virtuous design efforts, while allowing a different SKU of products to be pushed. What do you guys think on this? Is the incompetence of how Grav weapons are ruled in 10th edition by design? I suppose we can't know for sure, but if in 11th edition we see Grav weapons get an update, making them more narratively appropriate, which also happens to make them more preferred over other weapon types, and there just happens to be a new Primaris Grav weapon specialist unit, I think we'll all know what's what. That's a wrap on the problem with Grav weapons. If you enjoyed this video, there are buttons for liking, sharing, and subscribing. And special thanks to Julius Maximus, as well as my other generous patrons and channel members. Channel members and patrons get early access to videos. Just a little something for those who help keep the dream alive.
Save the dream!
Anyways, thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.